Hello to all KCS students. This is David Ngunza again. Today we'll be discussing VLAN, Virtual LAN or Virtual Local Area Network. So the VLAN basically is a very important topic in networking. So it helps you separate a big broadcast domain into isolated network. So you go from one big LAN into virtual LANs, okay guys? And we'll be also discussing trunking, which allows the switch to basically transfer VLAN across. It can be across two switches or from the switch to the router. And then we need to set up a router on the stick. So basically, when we're working with layer 2 switch, the layer switch, as you guys may know, by definition, the switch only allows devices connected to the same network to intercommunicate, right? So now we need to add the router on top of it that we call router on the switch to allow different VLAN to interchange or to intercommunicate among them. And then also we have to set up DHCP on the router side so that all the PCs or all the hosts within the VLAN can get an IP address dynamically or automatically. And also we can also set up SSH, secure shell protocol on port 22 so that we can allow the router to be remotely accessed by the user or the host within the VLANs. And also additionally, I can add an ACL, access control list, on the router so that we can restrict access to only specific hosts. All right, so let's move on to the topology and get started. So this is our topology. We have three VLANs. We have VLAN 10 called cells. We have VLAN 20 IT and VLAN 30 for the DNS VLANs. Inside the VLAN 30, we have couple DNS server. We have one for fakebook.com, not Facebook, fakebook.com, and we have one for kca.com. And then we'll set up our DHCP on the router so that all the PCs except the servers, which have like static IPs, will get IPs dynamically through DHCP. We need to set up VLANs on the switch, trunking protocol, and then sub interfaces on the router to make it happen. Okay, guys? So let's move on to the switch and start the configuration. So here we are in the switch. It's a layer 2 switch, operate at layer 2 of the OSI model. So config T, host name, let's give it a name, SW1 for the switch. Let's start by creating our first VLAN. VLAN 10. Let's name it cells. And then VLAN 20. We'll name it name IT. VLAN 30. Name, we call it DNS. And then let's create some virtual interfaces for each VLAN. VLAN 10, interface VLAN 20, interface VLAN 30. And also let's create what we call a native VLAN. VLAN 99, we can name it name native. So we don't want to keep the VLAN 1 in the trunking protocol as native, okay? All right, so now we've done so, let's assign the switch ports to each VLAN. So let's go back to the topology, guys. So for VLAN 1, we have decided to assign FA01 through 7 to VLAN 10, FA08 through 12 and 14 to VLAN 20, and FA015 through 24 to VLAN 30. All right, let's get to it. So let's configure interface range. First of all, let me do one single interface. Let's assign FA01 to VLAN 10. So by default, do show VLAN brief. By default, all the switch ports belong to VLAN 1 and it's named defaults. Now we need to move FA01 to 7 to VLAN 10, the cells VLAN. So let's do it manually. I want to do one VLAN, one fast Ethernet port right now. So you can see how we do it for a single port, okay? So we'll say interface. We have to go inside the interface in order to assign it to a VLAN. Interface FA01. We say switch ports, mode, access, switch ports access VLAN 10. So once we do again, do show VLAN brief, we can see that FA01, which was originally on VLAN 1, now has been moved to VLAN 10. And now the default with our VLAN start counting from FA02. We still have FA02, FA03, all the way to 7 to move to VLAN 10 the cells. So that's a lot of work. So what we need to do, we need to make a use of interface range commands. Interface range FA02 through 7, switch ports, mode access, switch port access VLAN 10. Let's verify one more time. Show VLAN, do show VLAN brief. Now we can see FA01 through 7 have been moved from VLAN 1 all the way to VLAN 10, the cells. And now we have FA08 through 24 still on VLAN 1. Now, interface range, let's take off the VLAN 20 ports. Interface range FA08 through 12. Now we're skipping 13 and we're moving to 14. We have to do comma FA014. We put a comma because there is a break. If it was just straight from 8 to 14, then we don't need to put a comma. We say switch ports mode access, switch port access VLAN 20. And then we need to do on the VLAN 30. Interface range FA015 through 24, switch port mode access, switch port access VLAN 30. And we're done for the port assignments. Remember, we created the VLAN 99 that we called native. So I'll show you where to use the native VLANs. Okay, so after doing that, every PC that will be plugged in between the ports FA01 through 7 will be part of VLAN 10. And then from FA012 to FA08 through 12 and 14 will be part of VLAN 20, and FA015 through 24 will belong to VLAN 30. Okay, now let's set up the router before we come back to the switch and complete the trunking. On the router now, let's do the basic initial configuration. Let's just do a host name for now. Host name R1, and then we have a physical interface, which is G00, on which we'll create the virtual interfaces that we call sub interfaces under G00. So we need to first of all, we need to turn on the interface. Interface G00, no shutdown, and then interface, let's create the sub interfaces now. G00.10 for VLAN 10. We'll say encapsulation.1q 10 for VLAN 10, and we set the IP address. IP address 192.168.10.1255.255.255.0, and then interface G00.20. IP address 192.168.20.1.255.255.255.0. If we hit enter, we get a flag stating that on the sub interface we have to do encapsulation.1q before assigning IPs. Let's check it out. Here's the message: configuring IP routing on a LAN and sub interface is only allowed if that sub interface is already configured as part of an IEE AO2.10, which is the encapsulation 1q. Okay, so we need to do encapsulation.1q 20, and then we can assign the IP address successfully. There we go. All right, so remember, on the sub interface, always type the encapsulation.1q VLAN tag first before assigning the IP address. And then we go to interface G00.30, encapsulation 30.1q, VLAN 30, IP add 192.168.30.1, 255.255.255.0. All right. Now we've done these parts. Let's configure the DHCP for each of the VLAN. IP DHCP pool VLAN 10 network 192.168.10.0 255.255.255.0, and then the default router, which will be the default gateway of each host on the LAN. 192.168.10.1, and then we have to set up the DNS server, which is 192.168.30.20. So VLAN 30 is where we have set up all our web services and the DNS server. All right. So, and let's exclude the first 24 IPs, IP DHCP. Exclude the address 192.168.10.1 to 192.168.10.24. Let's just exclude for all the 3 VLANs. This is for VLAN 20 now, which make it much faster. And then we do it for VLAN 30. Beautiful. And let's create the pool for the remaining VLAN networks. IP DHCP pool VLAN 20 network 192.168.20.0 255.255.255.0 default router 192.168.0.20.1, and the DNS server 192.168.20.30.20. Exits, and let's do the last pool, IP DHCP pool VLAN 30 network 192.168.30.0 255.255.255.0, and we have the default router of 192.168.30.1, DNS server 192.168.30.20. All right, that's it. So now by doing this, we can now go back to the switch and set up trunk. So G01 from the switch, as you looking into the topology, G01 is the exit interface from the switch to go to the router. So we have to make this wire or this cable a trunk tunnel. All right, so let's do it. Interface G01, switch ports, mode, trunk, and it's app, and we can say switch ports. We need to allow traffic, VLAN traffic on the trunk. Switch port trunk, allowed VLAN 10, 20, and 30. Switch port trunk. Let's change the native VLAN 99. All right, that's it. I think we're done here. Let's verify the configuration first. So if you would like to see which switch port interface has been configured with trunk, you have to run the following command: show interface trunk. Now we can see that we have the G01, the mode is on and the status is trunking, meaning it's set up, it's enabled. And then we have the native VLAN, which was 1 by default, and now we change it to 99. And then we have our ports, which is G01, allowing VLAN 10, 20, 30 on the trunk. All right, so now we can peacefully go into our PCs and request an IP address. Now let's do a DHCP release, and then after that we can do a renew. ipconfig/renew. All right, we got an IP address, which is good. And we go to the next PC. We'll do the same. IP DHCP renew. New IP 26. Actually, since we have set these VLAN these PCs to VLAN 10, so they are getting the IP address from network of VLAN 10. Same here. We're going to VLAN 20. We do IP DHCP renew, and we'll get an IP address from VLAN 20. Next PC, same command, ipconfig renew, and we got our IP address. Beautiful. And let's go to VLAN 20. So in VLAN 30, only the PCs are allowed for DHCP, and the server are manual, static. Okay, so VLAN 30 is set up. And let's do the second PC in VLAN 30. Done. Very good. All right. So now I think we're done here. Let's test if we can reach the web browser from the PCs. We have kca.com and fakebook.com. Let's try that. So it's gonna take a few moments to load this page. In Packet Tracer, it's very slow when we're trying to open the web browser. So let's just give it some time. And while it's loading, I can just tell you now that we have a new session coming up in April the 20th. April 20th, KCA is starting a new session with CCNA. And then in March 7 to the current students, we have an event here in Dallas-Fort Worth where we'll be meeting physically, configuring basically networking on real equipment, physical equipment. We have the Cisco Layer 2, we have a lot of routers, and we have many switches. We have a lot of equipment. I actually have a Juniper switch, and then on that day in March 7, every student from different states will come here. We're gonna have a conference room in a hotel, and then we'll have to practice, do basically a real life hands-on troubleshooting. All right, guys. So now I think the PC is now fully loaded. Let's test the website, kca.com. Let's see if we can reach it. Go. There we go. We can reach it. It's reachable. All right. And another web server was fakebook.com. Not Facebook, but fakebook. It's just some similar, you know. Okay, so fakebook. Okay, there's a typo there. Okay, fakebook.com should take us to the Facebook page, right? Facebook page. All right, guys. Good. I think we're good from here. Now let's move on to the next additional information or topic. We need to set up SSH on this router in Dallas. So we can say, let's set the host name back to Dallas, host name. IP domain. So to set up SSH, we need to have an IP domain name. IP domain name kca.com, and then we need to create a username. Username KCA, set some privilege 15, full privilege, secrets KCA 123, and then we need to create what we call the crypto key. Crypto key generates ARC. Yes, 1024. And then we have to apply the SSH. We need to set up SSH on the line, inside the line VTY. So line VTY 0 to 15. We say transport inputs SSH and login local. Now SSH is set up. Let's check the IP addresses here first. Do show IP interface brief. So we have 192.168.10.1, 192.168.20.1, 192.168.30.1 on the sub interfaces. So each one of these IPs can be used as a remote IP to SSH into the router. Always remember the username and the password, okay? So we go to the PC in Dallas in VLAN 10. Now let's check its IP address. We have 192.168.10.25, so we can do SSH-L, KCA is the username, 192.168. We can use 10.1, and it will prompt us for the password, which is KCA.123. And we are inside the Dallas router from the PC in VLAN 10. And we can exit, just to kill it. Now, we can test that as well in Houston, quickly. SSH-L KCA 192.168.10.1. Username is password is KCA123. Enter. We are in, and we can also test that from Houston, from the the VLAN 30. SSH-L KCA 192.168.10.1 KCA 123 in. So as you guys can see, any PC from any VLAN in this configuration can access this router remotely through SSH. Is this a good thing? No, it's not, because a router is not supposed to be accessible to anyone, right? We need to restrict access. So we haven't studied our access control list yet, but I'm just putting it out there. I'm just showing you guys how it works. In the next week, we'll be learning access control list. So we'll go to let's suppose that we want to allow only this particular PC to be able to SSH, 192.168.10.25. So we just go to the router, and we'll create what we call an access control list. Access list 1, we can permit 192.168.10.25, and we have to apply it to the line VTY. Line VTY 0 through 15, we'll say access class 1 in. Exit. At this moment, all these PCs which were connected successfully to the remoting into the Dallas router, if we exit and try to go back in, we'll get refused access. See, connection refused by remote host. Let's test in Houston or in VLAN 30. I don't know why I keep saying Houston. Just get used to those cities. SSH from VLAN 30, connection refused. And in VLAN 10, only one PC can do that. So this PC, KCA123, and it's in, right? And when we go to the second PC in the same VLAN, which is the 26, 192.168.10.26, try to SSH, SSH-L, KCA 192.168.10.1. Connection refused by remote host. Okay, so this is the power of access control list. So basically it helps you restrict access into your network resources. Thank you so much for watching, guys. This is David Ngunza again from KCA. So today we discussed VLAN, trunk, DHCP, SSH, and access control list. For those who are watching online, guys, who are not yet students of KCA, we encourage you guys, if you're interested in technology, networking, AWS, cloud computing, please join us. We have a new session of training starting in April the 28th. April 20, 2026, and registration starts from February 10 and will end in April the 20th. Please take advantage of this opportunity. It's really, really helping us, people getting jobs in IT. and also we prepare you on getting your certificates. After completing this program, we give you 3 mock interviews, prepare you for real world interview, and also we help build your resume, so that you can attract employers to call you for interviews. Okay, guys, thank you very much for watching, and you can call us at 512-290-6057, 512-290-6057. And then April the 20th, it's a new session that's starting with KCA. Thank you very much and see you soon.